just thinking of the Second World War and afterwards, and there was a social contract and the governments realised that perhaps they'd made a mistake and the whole place was in ashes and ruins, and they made a kind of a social contract with people and said it's all going to get better. We're going to have a national health service, welfare service, so that means if you're sick you won't starve to death. If you get poorly, you'll be able to go in the hospital, and I'll put some money aside for your pensions and look after you a bit. And that worked from about 1940 till around 1980. And I guess 1980 was about when the globalism started, perhaps. And I know from my experience, I was working in a factory that used to make packaging machines for sweets and things like that. And that factory closed down, and lots of factories in the north of England closed down at that time. And people who own these companies said, well, we can relocate to somewhere else where the costs are not so high and the profits can be maximised. So they relocated to Eastern Europe, or China, South Korea, countries where perhaps the wages were 10% of what the wages were in highly developed countries. And there was no worries about pensions, there was no worries about pollution, there was no worries about health and safety. You could be dipping in some kind of product in a vat of chemicals which is cancer causing, and then flush all the chemicals into the river. You don't have to worry about that, and profits can be maximised. And that maximising of profits is just gone out of control really now. And all these jobs which kind of people used to work in communities doing little things, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker type thing, they've slowly gone to more efficient ways of producing things, big companies doing it all. And then big companies move to places where it costs less to do that. And if you look around your house now, if you look at the screen you're looking at, it'll be made in China. Most of the stuff that you use will be made in China. And I just wonder how much of a win it is. We've kind of been fooled a bit with all these gadgets and things. And everyone does it. I'm exactly the same. I go to Amazon and look at something and buy it on Amazon because it's easy. The guy comes and delivers it a few days later and you've got your product and you're happy. But then you look around the streets where you live, and apart from the centre of cities where all the glass buildings of the corporations are, which looks great and everyone says things are moving on and society's looking great, until you go along the back streets a little bit and you see all the roads covered in potholes, beggars on the street, shops closed down, and it's a kind of third worldism that's becoming prevalent now in post-industrial societies. And the big companies are still maximising profits, but those profits are not being shared out anymore. They're going to the ruling class, the few people who own the machines. And if you think about that, what I was saying about the end of the Second World War, when there was a social contract, healthcare, schools, pensions, that made the life of the simple man a bit easier, even though he had to go out to work. And now the big companies are saying, why do we have to bother with these pensions? Why do we have to bother with the NHS? In a way, if you think about it, going to school gave you your education so you could go and get a job in the factory, and they wanted you to stay reasonably fit in the factory, so there was an NHS service to look after your health, to make sure you could carry on working. But then when the companies disappeared to other lands, and then the powers that be, which whatever political party it is, it all seems to be just puppets of the big corporations now. The big corporations do everything in secret. They're the new totalitarians behind the scenes, the ruling class, the elites, if you want to call them that. And they're pulling all the strings, and they're saying, why do we have to invest money in the health of the population? Why do we have to invest money in schools to make people clever? Why do we have to sort out the infrastructure and roads and transport? People are not working anymore, so why should we bother with doing that for them? And that's what's happened. That's what turned my head, was the Thatcher times in northern England, and that Thatcher Reagan economics trickle-down theory. What it's basically done is turn America, Britain, not so much yet in Germany, because Germany's still producing a lot of things in its own country, but it's made these countries into kind of third world countries. Like third world countries have got people who are piss poor, who've got no education, no hospitals, all living hand to mouth, fighting each other, living in shacks. And that's what we're heading towards. And as in third world countries, there's always a few elites in third world countries. You'll always see there's the rich people there, a very small amount, maybe a couple of percent, who've got great big Mercedes and live in palaces, while all the rest of the people are outside the gates of the rich, living in a horrible life. And that's the price we've paid for globalisation, in a way. And we're mugs in a way, because we've been mugged into it by shiny new toys from China and the ease of getting those toys. And you know, it doesn't happen from one day to another, but we see it increasing, and it's a scary thought that we, in a way, through our own small greed, have allowed big greed to control us. And it's just worrying, and I think that should be the main people we're really worrying about, is the big corporations who have no stops on them. They can do whatever they like. And we get scared about countries like Russia or communists, fascists, but the big companies are the ones without any rules on them, and they're the investors, often with companies that have got more value than whole countries, and they dictate what happens in the world. And I mean dictate literally. They are the new dictators. And all that work that was done after the Second World War by unionists, they got demonised eventually when the Thatcher time came in. That all the work people did for working class people has been demonised, and everyone's been put onto the thinking like the super rich without being the super rich.